Yeah, I think it's especially that, what is success and when do you stop and when do you know that you've made it and what's the peak, you know? And I don't think you ever know until you're on the other side of the peak, maybe. I remember when I first hit the bestseller list and my agent and my editor was congratulating me and said it's all up from here. And I said, I'm down. I'm all down. And I thought the pressure of having to keep on doing that, I already saw, I was like, well, that's going to be terrible to have to like do that again and again and again because, the first time you hit it, it's like, oh, you win the lottery. And then they expect you to win the lottery again and again and again. And I think the only way to do it is to just shut that off and just, write for yourself and basically have that same kind of joy and innocence as when you first started. Otherwise, I think the pressure does kill you.
This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens, and as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, you learn about their craft, them as a person, you'll become like me. Fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, any future book, or any book they blurb. And when you see their name, you'll want to support them, not only as incredible storytellers, but also the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. And I'm super excited because my guest today is Melissa de la Cruz. She's the #1 New York Times, #1 Publishers Weekly, and #1 IndieBound best-selling author of many critically acclaimed and award-winning novels for readers of all ages. Many of her more than 50 books have also topped USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and the Los Angeles Times bestseller lists and been published in over 20 countries. Seeing a trend here. Ms. de la Cruz's novel, The Isle of the Lost, the prequel to the Disney Channel original movie Descendants starring Kristen Chenoweth and Dove Cameron. She's also written Hallmark Christmas movies, because who doesn't love those? Christmas in Angel Falls and Pride and Prejudice and Mistletoe, based on her novel. They were both top-rated movies for their Christmas season on the Hallmark Channel, Hallmark Movies and Mysteries. And considering it's like Christmas in July right now, I know what I will watch when we're done talking. Melissa is also the founder and principal of Melissa de la Cruz Studio at Disney Publishing to create and package books in every genre and age range, but with a focus on middle grade and young adult from a diverse group of new and established writers. As a librarian, this is one of my favorite things, is to get those so-called reluctant readers. They just haven't found the right book for them. So the fact that you're doing it in different genres and to appeal to them, then they become hooked, which is terrific. She's also the co-director of Y'all Fest, and I didn't say that as well as Southerners do, in Charleston, South Carolina, and the co-founder of Y'all West in Santa Monica, California, the two largest and most vibrant young adult book festivals in the country, attracting more than 30,000 readers every year. Who says reading isn't happening? Melissa de la Cruz grew up in Manila, moved to San Francisco with her family, where she graduated high school as the Salvatorian from the Covenant of the Sacred Heart. She attended Columbia University, where she earned and majored in art history and English. She lives in West Hollywood with her husband and daughter. And I'm super excited because she is here to talk about her new book, This Song Is About Me. And I absolutely loved it. It's such a unique approach to storytelling. It's a wonderful story. So do you want to introduce us a little bit to Ryan Holding?
Sure. Ryan Holding is, the biggest pop star in the world. And she suddenly disappears the night of the big MTV Video Music Awards. And so there's a journalist who wants to track her down and find out exactly what happened to Ryan.
The opening scene has her on the stage. I mean, we've all grown up watching the MTV Video Music Awards with the little silver astronaut. I mean, just iconic. We can all think about where we were when we've watched those awards and seeing our favorite singer, songwriter, artists win those awards. So the fact that Elise wants to figure out where she is, she begins by kind of almost like what a detective would do, is start to interview people who were close to her. And so this is a story that is written from different points of view as Elise is interviewing these people. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose to structure it like this?
It was a little bit, I guess, the inspiration for the book. And I have to kind of talk about that a little bit before I talk about the structure.
Sure.
Was, I really like Daisy Jones and the Six.
Yes.
And my daughter at the time was very much a Swiftie. And, I was thinking, and it was interesting because I'm not a Swiftie, although I like a lot of Taylor Swift's music. And I actually think her latest album, is my favorite, but I was not obsessed with Taylor Swift. My daughter, it was funny because she's 19 now, and at 9, we went to a Taylor Swift concert, and at 10, we went to the second Taylor Swift concert. I think we went to 1989 and the one after it, so I don't even remember what album
Yeah,
that
there's
was
so
after.
many albums and eras I can't keep track.
And so I asked her, "Do you wanna go to the Eras tour?" And she was like, "No, not really. I'm kinda over it." And then as it became bigger and bigger, suddenly Maddie wanted to go, and I said, "Oh my goodness," and Swift Mania happened. And so I had been wanting to write a book like Daisy and Jones and the Six about a pop star, and I thought, "Oh, maybe it could be inspired by, the one and only Taylor Swift." So it's a little bit of an Easter egg to Swifties. It's a little bit, about a mom trying to understand her daughter's obsession. And so I wanted it to be like what do you call that? Like a verbal kind of behind the video almost, kind of interview to as a structure for the novel.
Yeah, I have to admit, Daisy Jones and the Six is one of my favorites. Like, I have, like, a top
Exactly.
10 list of all time, and I just thought, it's always interesting for fans to kind of meet the people behind the songs just like it is for me to meet the writers behind the books I read and that sit on my bookshelves. And so I love the approach of her basically talking to them and them answering her questions, and that's what we see. I think what's so unique is the fact that everybody saw kind of a different side of Ryan Holding, and that's kind of what this kind of brings out in the story. And
Yeah.
so you're talking to her first boyfriend, and I mean, she hits the tour scene. I mean, if you call it a tour, that big concert she did as bluegrass at the age of
Mhm.
13. Very much like Taylor. I mean, started at a very young age, and she just married a local guy from Cleveland, right? Travis Kelsey is from here. So,
My husband's from Cleveland also. So I didn't know that you guys were based in Cleveland. So yay.
so super happy for that and certainly wish them well. But it's also a story of celebrity and
Mhm.
how well do we know the people that we are friends with that aren't celebrities? But then just seeing the toll that celebrity takes on people is kind of shown or exposed in this book. Good things, also some tough things. So, can you talk a little bit about, you know, who you chose to for Elise to track down to find to figure out where Ryan possibly.
Yeah, so you got to talk to her best friends from high school. You got to talk to the bandmates. A couple of red herrings. A couple of the villains that she kind of tracks down, and try to find out exactly what happened. And one of the things is did Ryan do this to herself? Like, is she the mastermind behind it all? And yeah, no, it was kind of fun, to take that inspiration and kind of imagine different world. And, I think, as somebody who's seen, I've kind of been a little fascinated by, I'm in LA right now, and I've been in LA now for 23 years, and I was part of the Descendants project, and I've seen a lot of young child stars, and really what always struck me was to have these, children, but they had adult jobs, it was like, a lot of people were, they were dependent on these kids, these stars, for their livelihood. And I just think it kind of creates this weird dynamic, because the kids really are still just kids, but then there's this whole kind of apparatus on them. So I thought that would be kind of fascinating to kind of look at and explore a little bit. So yeah.
I think so too. Did you have a favorite person that you were interviewing during the course of this whose perspective you liked a lot?
you know, I'm trying to think. I think the first boyfriend was kind of fun, and I think the high school best friend was fun. I think it's always fun to talk to the people who, knew you from the beginning because they see
Mhm.
you in a different way. But then also, the producer who's not, a little bit of the villain of the story was also kind of fun to do. And I tried to give everybody, like a three-dimensional, try to understand everybody, not just have, like a mustache twirling villain in the
Right.
story.
Right. I think that's the fascinating thing when you're reading stories from multiple points of view is that even though they're experiencing the same person, they're not quite experiencing that same person the same way. And then
Yes.
realizing what their fame and their celebrity, what the impact has, what that impact is on their friends and family. That it's not just Ryan and the pop star who's experiencing that, but the pressures then that her mom and dad feel and how they respond to being kind of thrust in that spotlight and her best friend and people wanting to be friends with Mari, her best friend, because she knows and she's best friends with Ryan. So do they really want to be friends with her or do they just want access to Ryan? And the first boyfriend, yeah, I mean, just it's a great cast of characters. Even her first teacher,
Mhm.
Frank, who, she comes in, her mom is like, yeah, everybody has a guitar. Like, that's too
Yeah.
ordinary. Right, so she'll do the banjo, and bluegrass is terrific, and so she learns that very masterfully at a young age.
Oh, yeah.
So that is fun, and then he talks a little bit when he has the instrument that for every instrument, it leaves behind a little bit of the artist who played it before, and
Mm.
I just thought, so neat, so it makes me start to think like, "Okay, who had the banjo before her, and what was their journey, with music like?"
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think I like to write about musicians because 'cause I'm a terrible musician, so it's almost a fantasy of putting, imagining that, being so talented in that way because it's such a different talent, although I think songwriting is, I mean, that's still writing, but the musicality, the ability to, think of sound in that way, I think that's just so fascinating and so fun. And, the ability to, manipulate your image, it's just so interesting, especially being that young, what does that do to a person, to a character, And I've definitely seen a lot of kids here in Hollywood, at 13, saying, "No, I that people have turned down projects because, oh, that wasn't right for them." And, like, I'm always thinking, "Wow, how crazy to know that at that age," Like, some of these kids are really very old beyond their years, and I think that's what it takes to be that ambitious, to wanna be in entertainment and music. You know, crazy.
To me, and that's the thing I learned from reading this book. I mean, you always kind of have ideas, and Daisy Jones gave us a little bit, but your book, This Song Is About Me, capturing Ryan and kind of following her career over several years. So it's not just you're following her for one summer. I mean, this is several years. She starts at the age of 13, goes to like this county fair type thing and plays and is mesmerized when she walks on stage. And I think, my goodness, at the age of 13, would I have been comfortable doing that? Would you have been comfortable doing that? Yeah, I know you're shaking your head. I'm thinking the same thing.
Absolutely not. It's crazy.
When How old were you when you first started writing? Like, did you know when you were like 13 or a kid that you wanted to be a writer? Was this something you always wanted to do?
Absolutely. I think that's what I relate to with Ryan, knowing what I wanted to do from a very young age. And writing was the only thing I ever wanted to do. And I really remember learning to read, and liking that so much, like loving reading so much that I wanted to write, loving books and just, I was the kid who was like reading at lunch. I didn't go out in the playground. I was at the library. I hoovered books. Yeah, I mean, I just love books. It took a long time to be, to join the real world. It was kind of a lot of the fantasy world for a long time. But yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted. And I sold my first book when I was 27. But I wanted to be a writer since I was 8 years old. So to me, it took 20 years to be, to be a writer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think
Yeah.
that's terrific. You knew what you wanted to do, and knowing like, Ryan knows exactly that that's what she wants to do. And
But yeah.
so, obviously, you relate to that. It took me several years and several careers to figure out that I wanted to be a librarian. However, eventually you get to it, but I understand that sense of agency when you're just in the space that you just it's there's like an ease when it comes to doing what you're doing. It's not that it's not work, it's just it's kind of where you're supposed to be and that you don't doubt that. And same with you and with Ryan, that this is the space you're supposed to be in. She has this like steely sense of reserve and an ambition that wants to work and wants to work faster. Where I think at one point, Frank, who started teaching her, was like, you just need to slow down. It'll all come. You know, you're young, you just started, but she is propelled by a force, I think, bigger than her to do this, to play.
Yeah, no, I think it's a gift, I mean, talent really is a gift, and, I feel really lucky that I always knew what I wanted to do, there was no really trying to look for something to do, it was like, that's what I wanted to do, and it's just like, how do I make a living out of what I wanna do? And I think as an artist, that's what you struggle with, so I feel really lucky that I'm able to do that as my job, but it's also my and, and I think it's interesting because my husband's also a writer, but he came to it a little later in life. He was an architect first, it took him a long time to kind of.
Interesting. Like right and left brained.
Mhm, yeah, and he said, "Well, you're so lucky that you always knew that that's what you wanna do." And I always tell people, it's also all I can do. I can't do anything else.
I find that hard to believe with the world that you create,
I can't cook,
but that's okay.
editor. I was a mediocre employee at all my other jobs, but I loved writing, and I do think that, you know it's just something that, it strikes you and, it's like being struck by lightning and it's fun to do and it's still fun to do. And I think that, yeah, and it just makes you a little different from people for sure.
But still, I appreciate the fact that you knew what your skill and what your gift was, and you leaned into that, because I know it wasn't easy when you first started. All the times you wrote things and submitted things and all of that, you continued with that and you continue to do what you were meant to do. And so this book gears a little bit more towards adult,
Yeah,
which is a bit
yeah,
of a
and
departure.
cultural. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a why.
Yeah, but I love the fact that you're trying new things and like know that considering you're writing books mostly for middle grade, right, to capture them and then inspire that love of reading, that you continue to grow, and readers of all ages. I mean, I know I've read your books, and it was when I was in grad school for a library, took a young adult class, and you know we read, so it's a gift. And to want to continue to explore that, you can check the little box that says you can write adult novels too, because this is a fantastic story that I think everybody is going to resonate with. There's part mystery because she's gone. There's the cool who else is adjacent to her and what do they know? And at the same time, there's somebody trying to capture all of that and see if they can kind of put it all together for it to make sense and have some sort of resolution. I'm
Yes.
just blown away by what we do to celebrities.
Yeah. I mean,
That ooh,
at this point, it's almost like, is it even worth it? Because the internet is so nasty. And
mhm.
if you're at all visible, in any capacity, any sort of success at all just gets you this like gross attention, and it really is like from the smallest thing, like my friend wrote an article for New York Magazine, and I'd introduced her to the editor there, and it was her dream to write for New York Magazine. She was so excited. And then she said, "Oh my God, Mel, did you see the comments? And they're so mean." And I said, "You really just can't even look at the comments." And she's like, "Is it my article?" I said, "No, it's like every article. Any woman who writes anything at all in public is like, especially if it's seen as something, that other people would want, let's say, like writing for New York Magazine, having your record out, having a best-selling book. I mean, it is really just vicious. So And it's funny because it's such a, as Americans, it's something that, I think there was something when I think a couple of years ago, I read something that like the majority of American teenagers just want to be famous. Like everybody wants to be celebrity, which is so crazy, that everybody just wants to be seen. So I guess that's that social media that's driving us, you know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just finished reading Fame Sick by Lena Dunham. I don't know if you've read
It's
that
on my
yet.
list. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good, and it just really it's almost this deal with the devil that happened to her, and it's just so awful, what happened to her, the stress, what happened to her body, her
Mhm.
health, but also that, like, the viciousness of the internet. I mean, you can't help it. You do read some of it, especially you're young. I think she's 40 now, so she's like a different generation than me. I feel, I feel a little bit like at least I'm shielded from that. Like I'm 54. I grew up, we kind of didn't really take a
We
lot of these
dodged
things.
that, didn't
We,
we?
we really did not care what you think of us, and it's such a gift, and, you see people who are younger than us, and they really care, and they really believe it, and it's like, "No, oh my god, why would you believe that crap?" You know?
Right.
That's just the internet, you gotta shut that off. Yeah, especially if you get to be, Ryan Holding, somebody who wins the MTV Music Video Awards. I mean, all of the commentary about Taylor Swift. I mean, her wedding,
Yeah.
it's like it's just so interesting. And what I love about Taylor Swift is she's just living her life and enjoying it. And she enjoys it so much. And it's just so great to see somebody, kind of navigate, those parts of celebrity so well, so
Agreed. I think at one point in the book, Ryan is asked, "Why do you even do this?" And she said, "Because I felt like I had to, because I got these ideas and they needed somewhere to go." And at the
yeah.
same time, there's a scene in the book with Ryan where you talk about social media and how cruel it is, where she's criticized if she goes out in something that is a little bit revealing. Then she's, trashy. And then she wears like a hoodie, sweatshirt, and sweatpants. And she's like it's too sloppy, and what's she hiding because she's got on like a baggy hoodie. And so I'm like, it's one of those things, no matter what you do, people are going to have an opinion, and very rarely
Yes.
is it a nice opinion. I don't know why we
Absolutely.
feel the need to tear each other down. And celebrity, we sometimes like love to build them up, and then we take great pleasure, like Schadenfreude, where you just watch somebody suffer,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
has changed.
Yeah, it really hasn't changed. I mean, it's really weird, like the amount of you would never say anything like that to anybody's face, but when you're at a computer, people will like just go off, and I would never do that, and I said, who has the time to do this, and why would anybody do that, and it's just so I don't really understand it, and I remember Michael Jackson, he had a famous line when somebody came up to him and said, it was like a fan who was kind of bothering him and said, you owe me, like I made you. And Michael Jackson said, not just you, baby. It's like, it's just one in a million. And he was just kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm trying to, I think he was with his kids somewhere or something. He didn't want to sign an autograph, and the fan got mad and said, you owe it to your fans. And he said, not to
Yeah.
you, not to one
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, which is healthy perspective, and you tackle this in the book because when she starts playing at the age of 13, she's performing bluegrass, which is a great I mean, Alison Krauss, one of my favorites, right? So, wonderful genre. And then she
Mhm.
kinda morphs as she grows, matures into some country, and then she becomes a little bit more pop, and people are horrified and feel like that she abandoned them, and, like, bluegrass wasn't she was too good for bluegrass now, which is not the case. I mean, I think all artists evolve. You evolved as you started writing in the different types of books and series of books that you wrote, and now branching out and doing an adult. Do you think all like the young adult and then the middle graders going to be like Melissa de la Cruz? You abandoned us. No, that stuff still lives if that's what they want to read. they read. Same thing with music. I don't know why we have to judge people for evolving.
Yeah, I think there's just, people don't really understand artists. And I think that's one of the, I think it's just fundamental. And I think there's a lot of jealousy, especially today, with people kind of using AI, thinking that that's, I have a lot of musician friends. Again, I live in LA, so we have a lot of musician friends. And, they said, oh, yeah, my accountant, wanted me to listen to this song that he made on, some AI platform. It's like, dude, that's not what I do, and if you think any way close to what I do, you're wrong. And we were talking about it and I said, it's just like, it's like a fun thing. I have another friend who uses it to make like kind of fun songs for our get together. So it's kind of this like kind of funny joke that we do, but like, we know it's like a joke but then some people think that they've actually made music and it's like, no, actually you have not.
No. It's funny as a librarian. I mean, I'm trained to vet information, right? To think about it critically. Could this possibly be real? Not real? Is this a credible source? Study how many people involved, double blind, all of that fun stuff, right? It's the equivalent of people going to like Google and knowing the answer because the internet's told them so. And I just think this AI right now existing in this world with it without guardrails and what it is capable of doing and destroying. I mean, you're using it in a fun way, thinking critically about how you're using it, but not everybody has that skill set to do that. And it's on the internet. It must be true.
Yeah, what's scary is that, apparently there's all these like AI influencers, like where they're trying to sell wellness or something, and they're not even real people, which is scary, because I think it was funny because our daughter is 19 and my husband and I were laughing at this cat video. It was like cats, like, doing something funny. And my kid looked at it and said, you guys, this is a dumb AI video. And she was like, you're so old. You can't even tell it's AI. I was like, oh my God, like we all have to get better at this, because it was interesting. And now that I know that it's out there, it's like, oh, I think you have to be more vigilant. And also for me, it's also made me not as interested. I'm like, well, if it's all fake, why do I even have to look at it? So I
I
think,
applaud you. Would like high
right?
five you right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so if it's all fake and like I have to take a moment to decide what's fake or not, I was like, oh, that's just too much. My daughter now has a flip phone and I was reading something and said, unless you're trying to sell something, because you do have to use social media, to sell your products and your books and stuff. You really don't need to be on it. Like if you're a private person, there's no need to be on it, you know?
Mm-mm.
Like I have lots of group chats, I
Mhm.
have private threads, and I think that's it. I think it is fun. To me, it's fun to post. If it's not fun anymore, I don't, and honestly, like it's Gen X, I don't really care what anybody thinks. So if it's fun, I post it. If not, I don't. And nobody needs to read into anything, Why didn't I post at the dinner? Maybe I didn't look good in the photo, and that's the only reason why.
Yeah, it's amazing. On one hand, there's the ability to kind of capture things, right? Like if we're on a trip and we're traveling, right? You can
Yeah,
take these great photos and people. I don't always post when I travel. First of all, I don't need people knowing that I'm not at home when I'm
exactly.
traveling. Number one. Number two, I think like, am I really that interesting that people are, oh, great. Like Jen was in wherever. No. And so I love the fact that we share a similar approach that like it's optional. Whereas I think the generations after us feel compelled. But I read an article because I also teach about teens and going back to flip phones that they don't want smartphones anymore, that
Yeah,
pressure to have to post at all times. And then you kind of lose yourself. Are you really in the present moment if you're just trying to document it? And
yeah.
we're not documenting anything like where we're sitting in sweatpants, flannel pants, and a hoodie reading a book, right? Or nor everything is curated. So not really authentic.
I think it's just so terrible. I told my daughter, it's so terrible that you all have to be so attractive now. That's terrible.
It
We
is.
when we were young, we did not look perfect, and we thought we were beautiful. We were fine. We ate a lot of pizza, you know,
It's
drank a lot of
exactly right.
beer. We had a lot of fun. And, now the kids, I mean, their Instagrams are curated like magazines. And I said, "Oh my God, what pressure that must be. That's awful."
Right,
You
and
know?
some aren't able to handle that pressure, and
Of
that's
course not.
a sad thing, and celebrities, you add that too, where every single like, their entire life, I think one of the lines in the book, their entire life is on display.
Yeah. I mean,
I can remember watching oh gosh, it was back in the day because 'cause we're roughly the same age, Cribs on MTV,
yeah.
and I remember,
Yeah.
wow, they have, like, a movie theater in their house, and they have a basketball court, like, wow, and then I was like, yeah, because they can't go to the local park and shoot hoops with their friends because they're
Yeah.
mobbed and they're not, or they're
Yeah.
criticized for not signing an autograph or they're it's just such a different world.
I thought it was sad. I also read something about Michael Jackson, like his team would like ask the supermarkets to close and he would shop there, in the morning, from like when before they were open, just so he could have that experience of being in the grocery store. And I thought, "Oh, that's so sad."
It
Like it
it
was.
is yeah, so as much as I don't like grocery shopping now, I'm gonna pay attention because not everybody gets to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like it either, It's a chore.
It is a chore. It is one of my least favorite things to do for sure. So the other interesting line in this book that came up was no one ever wants to reach the summit because of what's on the other side. And I thought how interesting trying to figure out at what point is the top? How far do you keep working? And even Ryan's asking that. She's friends with some of these models and she's friends with somebody who helps her write music and write the lyrics and bounce them off as part of her team, Jasmine. I'm thinking of Jazz. And she says to her, like, am I supposed to do this for the rest of my life? And here she is, like 14, 15 years old, can't even drive a car, but is thinking about the rest of her life and if this is something she's always supposed to do.
Yeah, I think it's like, especially that, what is success and when do you stop and when do you know that you've made it and what's the peak, you know? And I don't think you ever know until you're on the other side of the peak, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Uh,
Yeah,
I remember when I first hit the bestseller list and my agent and my editor was congratulating me and said it's all up from here. And I said, I'm down. I'm all down. And I thought the pressure of having to keep on doing that, I already saw, I was like, well, that's going to be terrible to have to like do that again and again and again, because, the first time you hit it, it's like, oh, you win the lottery. And then they expect you to win the lottery again and again and again. And I think the only way to do it is to just shut that off and just, write for yourself and, basically have that same kind of joy and innocence as when you first started. Otherwise, I think the pressure does kill you. Although I always, when I think about all the pressure I'm under, I think, well, George Martin hasn't finished Game of Thrones yet, so I'm good.
right. I was just going to ask you how you mitigate that pressure with that sense of, my gosh, I have to do this again and I have to do it again. But you just said you write because it brings you joy.
Yes, and it pays the bills,
Yes.
It's like, well, I'm a contracted deadline, so I have to turn it in, so there's that. Yeah, but I think, at one point I thought, the only person I don't want to disappoint is myself. It's okay to disappoint everybody else, because like I think you really would, I think your health would suffer, Again, just reading Famesick with Lena Dunham, she was 23 when she was handed a big show on HBO, and
Right.
I just don't know anybody, like, is healthy under that much pressure, so at that age.
Especially doing something that you love doing. I think that's what complicates it even more. I mean, there are a lot of us who have jobs where there's pressure, but we know we can walk away from it because we might not love it. We can find another job doing something we like. So we think, but that artistry that's involved with writing, singing, producing, any of the arts, that's so much a part of who you are that trying to separate that, I imagine, is tough.
Yeah, it is part of your identity, but I always think the work, especially, like, when it's done, it's done. It's like, "Oh, that was fun. I did that," moving on, next one,
Yeah.
you know?
Gen Xers, we are tough, aren't we?
We're very resilient, but we knew the
Yes.
world was terrible from the beginning.
Right. Exactly. I think the other interesting line and things that come up in this book is you have to have the freedom and the support to let things be good or bad so you can find the voice that's really yours. And I think that's something that Ryan experiences as she's trying to figure out what she wants to write and the style in which she wants to write it and if she wants to try something new.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's basically somebody growing up and trying and deciding what they want.
Has your daughter read the book?
Nope, she has not. I think it's hard when your mom is a writer, and you just want to see mom as mom.
No, that's good. I think one of my favorite scenes is Ryan, her VMA speech, and it's basically it reminded me a lot of Eleanor Roosevelt said there's a
Mm.
special place in hell for women who don't help other women, but just kind of to fly in the face of all the people who are just mean. And they're real life. They're not like the AI bots or the trolls. They're just human beings who are not nice to one another.
Yeah.
So found this book just incredible. I didn't want to put it down. I didn't want it to end.
Yeah.
The lyrics in the songs in the book that Ryan writes, I'm assuming you wrote those.
Yes, I wrote
So
them.
then the next question is, did you hear particular instruments with them? Was it always a banjo? Was there a guitar?
Yeah, I think I tried to, keep it in my imagination as to where she was, in her musical journey for sure. And but they were just lyrics, so I feel like lyrics, it's like poetry, and I used to write poetry, so
They're beautiful. They're beautiful lyrics. The lyric about the hummingbird and its heart, just wonderful lyric. So I was like, oh, there's got to be a soundtrack for this book. Not yet. Not yet. Somebody will do it. Was there anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to talk about with regards to this book? The song is about you.
yeah, no, I think that, anybody who's interested in music and Taylor Swift, reading a fun fictional Daisy Jones and the Six readers would like it. People who are interested in celebrity and, kind of a good mystery would like it too. So,
This is Stories End, the final 5 questions. So during the story, Ryan and Mari get together. They decide to watch a movie and eat popcorn, but on their popcorn are chopped up Reese's cups. How do you eat your popcorn?
eat them with the chocolate almonds. So I put the chocolate almonds and the popcorn together, and I love that.
Protein. I love it.
Yeah.
Which celebrity, and now that I know that you live in LA, this might be hard, but which celebrity would you like to meet and interview for a book? Kind of being the Elise of the book.
Huh. That's funny because I used to be a journalist and I used to interview celebrities. So I always know that the bigger the celebrity, the interview will be canceled, at least 3 times, rescheduled another 3 times. And then you'll have, maybe like an hour with the celebrity. And if you're lucky, I think sometimes it would be like 5 minutes. I used to do the back page of, some magazines when it was like, kind of five questions. And I remember I interviewed somebody and they were trying to catch their private plane, and they were like, I literally had 5 minutes. So knowing how tough it is to secure them, I actually think I would like to talk to Lana Dunham because I just read her book, and I just found it so fascinating and so well written. So I would love to talk to her about
You just manifested it, and I can't wait to read that book. So,
that.
which moment do you wish you were a fly on the wall for?
Like any moment,
Any.
or
Any moment in history? Any
hmm. At this point, I would have loved to be one of the 1,000 people at Taylor and Travis's wedding for sure.
Agreed. And
I
there've
think
been
that was
very few
really fun.
pictures. Yeah.
Very few pictures. Yep. I have a friend who went and said it was amazing. So
Glad. I'm glad because those are moments that are rare and celebrating and happiness. So I'm glad. If money, time, and travel were not an issue, who do you want to see in concert and who would you take with you?
okay, money, time, and travel. I mean, my favorite band growing up was Duran Duran, and I think I would always see them. You know, it was funny. They came to LA a couple of years ago, and I
Uh-huh.
said, "Oh, I'm over it. I don't need to go to the concert. I'm in my 50s." And then, like a week before, I was like, "Oh my god, I really want to go." About 10 friends, and we got kind of like not the best seats, not the worst seats, and it was so fun, and I would take them all again because we had so much fun at the Hollywood Bowl seeing Duran Duran, so for sure. Yep.
And they still sound good.
Oh, they
Yeah,
still sounded great. Yeah.
that's amazing. And then the final question, what song is always on your road trip playlist?
What song is always on my road trip playlist? I'm listening to Taylor Swift's new album right now, and I love that song "Wishlist." So that's always the first song that comes on when I turn my car on. So that one.
Perfect. Thank you to everyone who is listening. An even bigger thank you to you, Melissa De La Cruz, whose new book, This Song Is About You, just published. If you're looking for a book told from a series of interviews of family, friends of a pop star who goes missing after receiving an MTV VMA award, this is the book for you. If you're looking for a book with a perspective about what it's like to become famous at the age of 13 just for doing something you love to do, this is the book for you. If you're looking for a book with the unintended drama that being a talented musician brings, this is the book for you. To find out who else I will be in conversation with, go to storytocount.com. This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba.